In the mid-18th century, on a small island in the heart of the Indian Ocean, one of the most terrifying and exciting stories in history took place. The story of the survival and suffering of a group of slaves who were illegally abducted from their lands and found themselves facing a tragic fate after the ship they were on was wrecked. The result: a group of defenseless people were stranded on a deserted island in the middle of the ocean, where they spent 15 full years struggling for survival, with no hope of escape. But through their determination and resilience, they left a mark that the world continues to recount to this day. Welcome. Let us tell the story of the forgotten slaves on Sand Island. On a July night in 1761 AD, French captain Jean de Lafarge set sail in his ship, L'Autel, belonging to the French East India Company, from the island of Mauritius, then known as the Isle of France, bound for Madagascar. His crew carried 140 people. Their mission was to transport some goods, with the aim of returning the ship to France quickly. However, the captain did not stop at the official mission. He saw an opportunity to make an illegal deal, purchasing 161 men, women, and children from Madagascar to sell as slaves on his way back to France. This was despite the fact that the slave trade was prohibited in France at the time due to the war with Britain. These poor people were placed in the lower hold of the ship, in inhumane conditions with almost no ventilation. On the night of July 31st of the same year, while sailing in the dark, the ship was struck by a violent storm with winds exceeding 37 kilometers per hour. The captain was confused by the discrepancies in his nautical charts, and instead of waiting for morning to correct his course, he risked erratic navigation. Unfortunately for him and his passengers, he steered the wrong way. A few hours later, the ship struck the coral reefs surrounding an isolated island in the middle of the ocean. Large parts of the ship, especially the hold where the slaves were held, cracked and began to flood. While some crew members swam to the island, most of the slaves remained trapped inside the hold. Only 68 of the 161 people on board, along with some crew members, survived and reached the island. The island they sought refuge on was not a paradise, but a small piece of land no more than 7 meters above sea level, almost devoid of flora and fauna, with no shelter or water source other than seasonal rains. It was nothing more than a sandy desert in the middle of the ocean, later known as the Sand Island. With the harsh weather conditions, the slaves and crew needed a leader. However, Captain Jean was so traumatized that he collapsed, and his first officer, Barthélemy Casteldeverny, took command. He was cruel and racist. He separated the slaves from the rest of the crew and monopolized food and water for himself and his men, causing a number of slaves to die of thirst and starvation. Over time, the survivors began to make use of the wrecked ship's remains. They constructed ovens, tools, and even a small wooden ship they named Providence. Just 2 months after the disaster, Barthélemy and his men set sail, leaving the slaves behind, after falsely promising to send aid. But aid never arrived. The slaves spent months and years in complete isolation, digging shelters in the sand to protect themselves from the sun and storms, and hunting whatever birds, turtles, and fish they could. Despite their suffering, they repeatedly tried to escape by constructing rafts from the scrap wood, but all their attempts failed, as none of those who left returned. Their numbers dwindled over the years, until only 15 remained. 15 years later, on November 29, 1776, the French warship La Dauphine, commanded by Captain Jacques de Tromelin, arrived. When he boarded the island, He found only 8 survivors, 7 women and an 8-month-old infant. The rest had perished. Tromelin took the survivors with him to Mauritius, where they were declared not slaves, but free people who had been unjustly taken from their homeland. They were given homes and French citizenship as compensation for their suffering, while the infant was named Jacques Moses after the story of the prophet Moses. The island was renamed Tromelin Island after the captain who rescued them. After centuries of oblivion, their story was rediscovered in ancient records. Archaeological expeditions began between 2006 and 2013 to uncover traces of their life on the island, and the story